Unrealistic demands for peace. Russia and Ukraine's peace plans. Ukraine President Zelensky attended the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, with the stated goal to discuss his 10-point peace plan in a series of meetings, including a final meeting with 83 countries' national security advisors. The Russians, on the other hand, did not participate at Davos, so there was no discussions of peace with world leaders, which means there was no realistic aspect of reaching any agreement to end the war. Even though both parties of the war were not in direct or indirect talks, that was only one part of the issue preventing peace. But the other reason is that neither Russia or Ukraine have realistic peace demands. Zelensky went to Davos with much fanfare to win over world leaders to agree to his 10-point peace plan. The plan includes the following points: 1. Radiation and nuclear safety. 2. Food security. 3. Energy security. 4. Release of all prisoners and deportees. 5. Implementation of the UN Charter and restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity and the world order. 6. Withdrawal of Russian troops and cessation of hostilities. 7. Justice. 8. Immediate protection of the environment. 9. Prevention of escalation. 10. Confirmation to the end of the war. Zelensky said there was no alternative to this peace plan and welcomes participation of all nations with the exception of Russia. The demands of the 10-point plan are not realistic, and by not allowing participation of Russia in the talks means that Ukraine and the countries that signed on to the plan are dictating terms to the Russians. The Russian Foreign Ministry, for their part, has stated that the plan is a non-starter and that they would not agree to a plan that basically dictates an ultimatum to Russia. Zelensky was not able to reach agreement with the 83 national security advisors that this plan was the plan to go forward with. President Zelensky did finally agree that China has to be involved in the talks because of the close ties to Russia and its role in helping Russia get around some of the Western sanctions. Zelensky's one win is that he had a public relations success in that the longtime neutral country of Switzerland agreed to host peace talks. But even these talks will exclude Russia in the opening rounds. The start of these talks have not been announced yet. As unrealistic and unserious as the Ukraine proposal for peace is, the Russian demands are just as unrealistic. The Russian position is that Ukraine must be neutral and not be allowed to join NATO and the European Union. Ukraine must remain nuclear-free and accept Russia's annexation of territory for not only this war, but the annexations of 2014. With this agreed upon by the Ukraine, according to the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Galuzin, a, quote, comprehensive, just, and sustainable peace in Ukraine and Europe, end quote, is possible once the fighting between Ukraine and Russia ends. He also added that all Western weapons must be removed from Ukraine. Just like the Ukraine peace plan, the Russian peace plan is just dictating terms. The position is no NATO membership is understandable position and is an important reason why Russia went to war. NATO prior to the war had no security gains from extending its borders to the Russian border for no other purpose than to threat or be antagonistic towards Russia. So Russia wanting a buffer zone from the West is a Russian security concession since the end of World War II. But the statement that Ukraine cannot join the EU is absurd and exposes that Russia has no good plans for the Ukraine. The war has created significant damage to Ukrainian cities, industries, and infrastructure. After the war, these will need to be repaired, and Ukraine will need financial support to do that. Russia will not pay reparations, nor will they be willing to offer fair loans to Ukraine to repair the war damage. Without EU or Russian support, there is little prospect that Ukraine can recover from the war. This would leave Ukraine a poorer country that cannot serve its population and would make society unstable and would increase the chances of further Russian interference in Ukraine. The removal of Western weapons and no NATO membership would leave Ukraine militarily weak and unable to defend itself against another Russian invasion if they chose to do so. None of Ukraine's security needs, which negotiated for when it agreed to give up its nuclear weapons to the Budapest Memorandum, would be met by the Russian demands. With no availability of Western weapons, it will not have the security from the Russians, and without EU economic support, the Ukraine will be reduced to a vassal state that will be dominated by the Russians. The Russian peace terms make demands that Ukraine cannot abide. The need for peace talks is needed to end the war and restore peace and stability to Europe. Russia has legitimate security needs not to have NATO on its southern borders, though the direct cost of the war is that NATO is on its northern border, with Finland joining NATO in response to the Ukraine invasion. And Ukraine has legitimate security needs from Russia, which has proven to be the aggressor. Neither party's peace plans are going to end the war, but is especially not going to end the war when neither party will meet with the other or a third party representing the other's interests. Russia and Ukraine should use their need for security as the basis for talks to at least reach an armistice to stop the fighting, so all other points can be negotiated, which will not be an easy process. For example, the cessation of hostilities can start with NATO agreeing not to offer Ukraine membership and agree that it would not station troops or conduct exercises in the territory of Ukraine. Russia should agree that Ukraine can train with NATO and be armed by the West for its security needs. Russia should agree to Ukraine joining the EU with the stipulation that any discussion of an EU army needs to be specifically omit Ukraine. Both countries should agree to internationally monitored buffer zones to ensure fighting and movement of troops do not occur while permanent peace talks are being conducted. This is an example of what the basis to start peace talks should really look like. Then there can be other variations to a peace process, but the goal should be to get the real issues of the war and negotiate a path forward to peace.